This is Linda Lee Johnson, and this is Lesson 2, Conflict, Struggle, and Resistance to What Is. Resistance to what is our only problem. Conflict, struggle, and resistance is the attempt to get from what is to what I believe ought to be. Oh, has this caused disintegration in the body, and oh, what misery it's caused. So what is wrong with what is? The ideal that comes from the not I says, this is what I have to have in order to be happy. So happiness is usually about when you like what is. Do you agree? It's about what needs to be changed in order to feel secure and peaceful inside. And it usually has to do with my old purpose of living. I've got to be safe and non-disturbed. I'm not receiving enough attention. I have no approval. I don't feel needed and important. And I could lose my sense of comfort and pleasure. Nothing will be any different than what it is at this moment. It is always now. It is always what is now. If I see nothing that needs changing in the moment, then most likely I'm happy. Is that true? You know, Jesus said in John chapter 7:24, he said, judge not according to the appearances. It is the appearances that we label and judge in our what is, the now moment, that makes me feel miserable. Wouldn't you agree with that? Suppose I am depressed, a feeling of self-condemnation. Some may take expensive pills to get over it or spend thousands of dollars for therapy. But what if we were perfectly free to be depressed? What if we didn't take it too seriously? You see, when we are free to feel sorry for ourselves, the depression will last only a few moments. It's temporary. And then we wake up and we see the joke of it. You do know that, don't you, that most depression is just saying, I am not good enough. A terrible feeling about ourselves. And the laughter comes finally because our awareness is seen with true perception. We've stopped being in condemnation of ourselves. What else is depression but believing I'm not good enough? So did you ever feel free just to experience anxiety? We're always struggling to find the solution to change the circumstances, and then we become more anxious because we cannot find the solution. It's a vicious cycle, and the more we fight or resist our emotions, the more emotional we are. Most people are not in charge of their inner being, therefore their moods are erratic. I have seen that when I'm in charge of my inner state that I can be pretty good at raising the mood for everyone that's around me. Most people are resisting life instead of being an observer of it. There is no struggle and there's no real sorrow when we're able to be a beholder of life, a watcher of life. What is? What is the situation at hand, and you can always do something about that. But you cannot do anything about what you think ought to be, except be miserable and complain, because it is a fantasy. If nothing else, your what is can be ignored, but usually we can do something worthwhile. There's usually a contribution that we can make to any situation that we find ourselves in. At least we can have a different attitude about it. We don't know what the outcome to any what is will be 2 hours, 5 weeks, or even 10 years from now. Do we really know the outcome of anything? Are we really prophets knowing the future? 3 questions that cause tremendous torment in our lives. And just watch and see these 3 questions arise within you. One is, did I do right when I did such and such in the past? The other one is, am I doing right by doing now, in the present? The next one is, will I be doing right if I do such and such in the future? A Sufi master said the veil of the ego is dark, earthly veil, while the veil of the heart is a radiant heavenly veil. Sufi disciples are required to keep watch methodically on their own behavior. Can we be free to experience what may arise today? That is true freedom, and it's a source of serenity, peace, and joy. We are all really experiencing only one thing, and that is our inner state of being. Most people are experiencing very unpleasant inner feelings most of the time, and few people are free to experience the inner state that they are in. They're fighting, they're resisting it, it's making them miserable, they're judging their inner feelings and the people and circumstances that are contributing to it. Now the problem is that we're always radiating out into our world what we are experiencing inside. And then the law of attraction brings us corresponding experiences, and this is always done through our emotions or through our feeling. And that's why sometimes it just feels so heavy, because we've been putting out some heavy vibes, and those experiences come back, and they just, there they are. There are people who are agreeing with our negative thinking and coming into our life. So we're attracting them, or attracting the circumstances. Ideals. We set up ideals of what ought to be and struggle towards that ideal, believing that I will be happy at some future date when my ideal actualizes. And if we're not happy, we've been struggling towards some ideal. What are these ideals? An ideal, I always feel, is trying to make a deal with the very eye of your being, that precious Christ eye of your being. We're trying to make a deal with that. We're saying, oh, when I get well, then everything will be okay, then I'll be all right. When my home sells, when my kids move out, when I get a boyfriend, when my wife understands me, when my husband picks up after himself, when people recognize me, when I get a new home, when my bills are paid, and when my husband changes, that's always a big one, or when I win the lottery. So what are some of these ideals that you have to have in your life in order to enjoy what is? Gratitude, integration, and joy happen when we're not trying to have the present time, place, and circumstances undergo a change, when we're free to experience what is now. Whenever we set up an ideal, which must be met before we can be happy, we've entered a static, mythical state that has no life, and we feel miserable because we are not static beings. So, to experience gratitude would be to say that I'm free to experience what may arise, and I'll do this gracefully with fun and enjoyment. And now we've stopped the disintegration of the body with all of our negative emotions. A negative thought develops and propels the toxicity of negative emotions throughout the physiological system. The body is in good health when the inherent power within is operating freely. It takes a relatively short time for infinite intelligence to bring about well-being in the body when we are reporting accurately that all is well. With each moment, we can realize that Christ, the presence of love, is more real than the appearance of what we see, hear, or feel. There is a cry of pain in our soul every time we resist the now moment of the what is. With our idea of what ought to be, many of the experiences in our life that have caused us grief and heartache have crystallized within us, causing us to have similar experiences again and again. We then believe that these experiences to be our lot in life. And as these experiences come up, let us realize that they are not attributes of God, that in actuality they are based on illusions from the past. They happened before, not now. They're coming to our consciousness for the recognition that they've been redeemed and forgiven. Conclusions resist the radiance, the greatest obstacles that keep us from experiencing the joy of the enlightened, What is are suggestions that we've accepted and the conclusions we have formed from these suggestions. Conclusion means closure, control, stoppage, final end, no defense possible, termination, irrevocable, unquestionable, definite, firm, fixed, terminal, and to judge. So every conclusion is made with emotion, and until it is reevaluated, it will persist in shaping our now. Every anxiety, anger, fear, resentment, and depression is based on a conclusion that we've made. It says, "This is the way it is." A conclusion becomes a law unto us, and our language lets us know when we've reached a conclusion. Look for the words never, always, nobody, everybody, all, and can't. Look at some of the conclusions. Examples. You always disappoint me. I'm always the one that has to give in. That food never agrees with me. We never have enough to pay the bills. You will never amount to anything. She always irritates me. Everybody's getting the flu. I can't do this right. Each of these statements is shouting irrevocable closure. It's firm, it's fixed, and these same conclusions, unquestionable and definite, keep repeating again and again throughout our lives, polluting our mind, creating toxicity in the body. Blame, guilt, shame, hostility, and insecurity are emotions that rise from these false conclusions. Many of our fixed conclusions have been with us since childhood. We have formed conclusions about our bodies, our family, our friends, our marriage, our health, our bosses, our environments, our love life, our homes, our religion, our past and future, all of which we think is our identity. Do you see how our what is clouded with old concepts and conclusions of every manner? Each conclusion is misrepresenting what is true. We sometimes get into arguments defending our fixed conclusions, while the other party defends their fixed opinions. Sometimes we gather data to make a case for our conclusion. We get on the internet to see what the authorities say, and we keep checking to see if some new authorities have something new to say about their conclusions. We discuss our conclusions with others, sometimes with complaining and blaming. How many of us have formed conclusion about someone from gossip? And from that time on, we have felt differently about that person. Well, you might ask, can't we have positive conclusions? You know, there are people who've known spiritual truth for years, and they have encased conclusions around their truth. They know the letter of the law, and sometimes this causes a fixed rigidity about them, and joy and rigidity do not do well in the same environment. The more fixed we are, the more it takes to inspire us. We tend to pick life apart. Things have to meet our expectation and the ideals of our conclusions. And if they do not, we tend to be critical. There's closure, there's termination to our freedom, and we wonder why. Often we feel threatened by others who have a different set of conclusions based upon their own truth. You see, what happens is that conclusions crystallize the truth and put up partition walls to keep them all guarded and to keep them intact. Oh, this can diminish our friends, as we find it so much safer just to be with others who have all the same conclusions that we do. There are no boundaries around truth that comes from revelation and inspiration. In other words, it is not a closure. It's unbounded, it's free, it's full of majesty. In the core of our being, we are love without legalistic boundaries. Jesus said the truth we know would bring us freedom. Just imagine having dinner with your partner of 15 years, and instead of meeting them with conclusions of good or bad, you meet them wanting to discover them anew. Oh, what a fresh beginning we can have when we do not label or perceive someone or some situation from an old evaluation, but we meet them with new eyes. With every false conclusion, stoppage and closure also take place in our bodies. Uncovering conclusions is like opening up channels of unadulterated life and substance, and feelings of expansiveness and wholeness. healing can take place, and we call that a miracle. Letting go of old conclusions, the greatest truth is we can uncover and we can let go of these conclusions. We no longer need to live with fixed, toxic attitudes and beliefs in our what is. A client and friend said, I remember when I was a child and I made a conclusion based on very little evidence. I functioned in my entire life based on that negative fixed assumption, and it was, I am not good enough. I have come to realize that this conditioned mind is like a drug dealer. It pushes I'm not good enough onto most of us. We get hooked on it, and it becomes an addiction. Feeding on not good enough, I found I refused compliments because of that negative conclusion I made when I was a child. Every moment was colored with that false conclusion. Every what is had I'm not good enough as a veil over my reality. To see through a false conclusion is to break a fraudulent contract and to blow wide open the gates of heaven and to throw off the chains that have bound us. When the light of your awareness sees the false fixed decisions, be prepared for something remarkable to happen. The truth and reality is what is left when the illusion is seen. And within this reality is your essence of completeness. An executive friend and client, she said, I felt victimized by my colleagues. And I realized that was from all of the conclusions I had of them. They always performed from my fixed assumptions. I felt one was trying to take over my position. Another was aggressive and combative. Another made no contribution and was a little weird. I decided to remove my conclusions and to operate from a place of not knowing for 1 week. Oh, was that enlightening. I discovered that they wanted the things I wanted. They wanted to see the greatness in everyone like I did. They wanted breakthrough thinking to take place in the company. They wanted to be aligned with high values. And the hard edges to life softened for me when I opened to discovering life instead of making conclusions. Everybody looked and acted so differently. They seemed to have such great ideas. Oh, I'm not making it important now for everyone to fit into my standards of how I think they ought to be. Whenever I feel myself feeling pressured and anxious, I know I am seeing life through a deception, and I look for the conclusion that I made. I know I have to go back to what am I here to discover in this what is moment. Discovery means to be aware, to gain knowledge. To gain knowledge of something not previously known. Discovery is creative and true comprehension. When we're in a state of discovery, we're in a state of vibrancy and realization. We're seeing a newness. We're seeing in a new light, open to new revelations. And then our lives are filled with wonder and expansiveness. Our temptation is to make a discovery and then to form a conclusion about it. When our conclusions are permanent, we slide down into our unconscious way of living. But when we are free to live our lives in discovery, we see life with innocent perception, yet with accurate awareness and discernment. We are open, we're fluid, we're willing to flow with life instead of resisting what is. We have freedom and an immense sense of allowing, loving, and knowing. Knowing is seeing without judging, without conclusions clouding our seeing. We have a grasp of what is real and what is not real, and we experience life without competition, struggle, superiority, or the need to defend. Within every now moment of what is, love is already established. Psalm 119, verse 64 says the earth is filled with your love. And John 15:9 confirms this. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. So we know that love is established. If I'm not experiencing that love, what ideal or judgment have I made that establishes what has to be before I can be happy? Be still and you might hear your authentic self say, give it up. Just let go. Surrender it now. Give me your burdens. Break free from this stagnant piece of life. It no longer serves you. And thank you for trusting me with it. Oh, I remember many times of exposing pain, writing it down, and that small voice inside of me would give me words like the above. It is the awareness of Christ within us that is creating this alchemy. Until we can be conscious in the present moment, the very idea that we are accomplishing something is often from some agenda of the not-I's. And that is why often it does not have the substance or the power that is created when we come from the purpose of what infinite intelligence would have us realize. When we've made our commitment to wake up, we discover how much we are resisting what is, and our ideal of the way things ought to be are not really what is. We forget that there is so much to be grateful for. Most of us have food and clothing, shelter and transportation, some interesting things to do, and some interesting people around us. All of that should keep us thankful. There are only two realities taking place all the time. One is full of human lies, and in the midst of that, when we place no judgment upon it, there is a heavenly reality, and it's always wanting to reveal itself to us. When we experience this, we no longer care if anything changes. In experiencing this presence, anyone who comes to mind is always touched by this presence. And everything becomes clear because God has ignited us to see with his vision, to trust and to love. Oh, and then we feel great springs of unspeakable joy and love. Wouldn't it be wonderful to live in a perpetual state of thanksgiving? This is where wonderful things happen to us because we're in a heavenly frequency, a kingdom of gratitude, a kingdom of continual blessings to experience. Life becomes dynamic, and our what is full of anticipation and trust. This is actually the fifth dimensional state of consciousness. A false ideal, which must be met in order for me to be happy in my what is, it's uncreated, it's unreal, it does not exist, it's an illusion, it's a false impression, it's all made up in the ego mind, it's imperfect, and it's in actuality, it's dead. But what is now is created, it's real, it exists, it's a fact, it's perfect, it's alive, it's dynamic, it's truth. When one is living with ideals, which one must have in order to be happy, one is insecure. To look at something without associating with something already known is to see that something new and fresh, to really look at it, to allow creative being to take place, to respond to something without conditioning, to be in the realm of discovery. Oh, when we can be awake for a moment to the mechanical associations that we have, and thus allow it to come to an end. This is called spiritual living, and it all comes from just observing what is going on, really observing how you are feeling in your emotions to the what is. Expectations and anticipations. Expectations based on misconceptions cause degeneration in a vicious cycle of disappointment and blame. Anticipation based on illusion leads to anxiety. The following statements show us that our what is often defiled by misperceptions. We think if I complain, I will get my own way. If I please people, they will all do what I want and they will all give me approval. If I improve myself, people will love and approve of me. They will see that I'm very important. And oh, how needed. I would be happy if other people or something were different. Others will accept my conclusions and my reasons. And if I please people, I will be non-disturbed. If I can only get my own way, I know I'll be non-disturbed. I have rights, which other people should respect. Other people know how they make me feel, and yet they will help, and then they will help me or change their ways. People will do what is right if they know what is right. people will not see that I'm inferior if I quote all the right authorities. Do you see all those misperceptions and how oftentimes those are the things that we believe that keep us trapped in feelings that I'm not good enough? Regeneration. The dictionary meaning is being renewed, reformed, spiritual rebirth, restored to grow anew. Regeneration is not something we gain. We get rid of a conditioning, allowing the new to come forth. Expectation and anticipation can be made conscious, and when they're made conscious, justifications based on illusions vanish, bringing false expectations to an end, and harmony returns to the body. Expectation based on fact leads to creative action. Anticipation based on fact leads to the joy of experiencing. The fact is that each experience is perfect for that time and place, even though it may not suit our taste or be without discomfort. But when we stand firm in the established presence as a witness or watcher of what is, we're not moved by circumstances or appearances. The not eyes of the thinking mind strategize, they analyze, they judge based on the past, dragging all of that into the beautiful new moment that has never ever lived before. It's a newborn moment, and they defile the innocence of it with ideals and judgments and conclusions of what we think ought to be. The conflict between what is and the ideal of what ought to be is the common lot of mankind. Freedom is when we discover that we can experience whatever arises in our way today. This is being open. When one is truly open, union with infinite intelligence occurs. The free one is conscious of being at one with spirit. So, you might want to work with the fact that what is your conclusion about, just think about if you're having any problems at all, you can just think about what is my conclusion about the people involved? What is your conclusion about the situation? What is your deepest truth at this time? Look for the conclusion that was made, and when you find the conclusion, you will see the illusion, and oh my, will you feel freedom. Thank you.